helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elam Counseling Services.
Hi, I'm Michael Hart, director of Elam Counseling Service, a Christian counseling ministry in Ottawa. And I want to thank you for listening to this edition of Life Transformation, a Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. If you're not familiar with Elam Counseling Service, then you can learn more about us at www.elamcounselingministry.com. We're a Christian counseling ministry that provides a professional counseling from a Christian perspective for a wide range of mental health and relationship issues. There are some of you who have asked about whether or not the payments that are made through Elam, if they are reimbursable through insurance companies. The answer to that is yes. And over the past few weeks, I've gotten also people who wanted to know the name Elam, where that name's come from. And I'd just like to say that Elam is a name that's found in the book of Exodus. Elam is the first place of rest, hope, and renewal that the Israelites came to when they were freed from slavery in Egypt. So the idea behind the name Elam is that this is a place of renewal, a new start, a place where people can find hope and peace after going through turmoil. And talking about turmoil, one of the turmoils that can come to relationship is when there is broken trust, when trust is broken in a relationship. And that's a discussion of our topic today. We'll be talking about broken trust. And with me in studio today is Rick Lequier. Rick is assisting me today, and he is one of our ministry assistants at Elam, and he's here in studio today. Thank you very much for joining us, Rick.
Well, thank you for inviting me here today, Michael, and having an opportunity to have an open discussion about this very important topic about trust. And, before coming on today, I was thinking a little bit about trust and, just how important it is to us as, as human beings, and just being able to experience trust, between one another and so on. And, for me, I travel internationally, fairly often, and just thinking about, you look around in the world and you look at how trust is really seems to be breaking down, right? In society in general. You look at, country to country, and I think of, a very close example right now is, you look at what's going on between Russia and, the Ukraine, and how things that trust relationship is broken down.
Trust between nations.
Yes. Between nations, and, on the political scene, between politicians and, the people that they represent. And you don't have to go very far. You look at Venezuela and all of the things that are happening in that country where, that relationship seems to have broken down as well. And you look in the workplace, and there just seems to be trust relationships are being broken on a regular basis between managers and their employees, and peer to peer, employees to employees, and so on. And of course, the thing to me that seems to be the most devastating is when you take it right down to the home level, right? And you have
between spouses,
between spouses, and between parents and children, and that type of thing. And so I'm just really happy to be here to be able to talk about some of these things. And I know that in your workshop on trust, you talk a lot about the importance of trust in relationships. And one of the first things I wanted to sort of maybe ask you is why, or can you at least tell us and the listeners why trust is so important? What is the underlying importance of trust in our lives?
I think to begin with, let me say that we are born with the innate need to have a close bond with others. Baby coming out of the womb of their mothers are seeking to connect, and very soon a child learns whether or not they can trust their caregivers. And as we become older in lives, we find security in trust. We find a sort of a bond, a closeness, reassurance when we're able to have relationships with others in which trust is a foundation of that relationship. As a matter of fact, one of the prominent theories in psychology is what is called the attachment theory, that talks just about that people has a need to attach to others and to have trust with others, and when that trust is broken, the term that is used to describe that broken trust is what they call attachment injury. So one of the leading researchers, John Gottman, did a study of relationship, and he says that all the other issues in a relationship are connected to trust. So if you were just to think about that, everything else that a couples go through in a relationship is related to trust. Whether you're talking about you're talking about finances, or you're talking about the sexual nature of the relation, part of the relationship, it all boils down to trust. So trust is very foundational to our experience, and it covers almost every area of our lives.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Even as we're growing up as children, and we form these bonds with friends and so on, and as you're growing up, and then over time, and I think a lot of us, as we grow up and we have these trust relationships with friends, we get to know people, and we form these relationships and so on, and then they get broken as well, and you get that experience and so on, And I mean, it just seems to be a part of life, as you're growing up and becoming a teenager, and and so on. I think to me, in my experience growing up, girls have always been better at that than guys, for some reason or other.
Trusting others to talk about their emotions.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be more open about those kinds of things. I'm often intrigued by, sometimes you see these guys in the big football players,
Right.
And they're interviewing them. They go, "I just really want to thank my mom for sticking with," and they're almost in tears. These guys are like 300 pounders and stuff like that, and and you can see where they've had that long lasting bond and trust relationship,
So even though they're 300 pounds and they look so so fearless, they're still talking about
and so we go through life and we develop these relationships and so on. Are there any? Can you maybe think of some biblical examples of some where there was some emotional pain, or where there was this broken trust happened and so on, where this this emotional pain that happened and so on,
when trust is broken. So let me just start this by saying that when trust is broken in a relationship, there is pain, but the closer the bond in that relationship, the more significant the pain. So when you have a relationship, for example, between a husband and wife, that is one of the closest relationship you can have, or a parent-child relationship, when trust is broken in those kind of relationship, the pain is very deep. If the relationship, the trust is broken, for example, between best friends, or in church situations, you have a spiritual mentor where there's a lot of trust in that person. And if that person were to do something to break trust, then the pain is very deep and very profound. So to answer your question about the biblical example, there is I think Psalm 55 captures the deepness of the emotional pain that occurs when trust is broken by someone who is very close. And David here in this psalm is speaking about the betrayal of his trusted advisor, Ahithophel. And he writes in Psalm 55 verse 4, "My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death are falling upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me." And he goes on to talk about is why it is so deep. The emotional pain is so deep in verse 12, when he said, if it was not an enemy that approached me, then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me, that did magnify himself against me, then I would have hid myself, but it was a man, my equal, my guide, and my acquaintance.
Interesting.
Right, very interesting. So he's saying, because of this close bond, because of this relationship I had, this close bond with this person, he's going to say, to further explain the closeness of the relationship by saying, we took sweet counsel together and walk unto the house of God in company. And he has put forth his hand against me. So someone might be listening to this broadcast today, and you might be going through tremendous pain that you're feeling as a result of some betrayal of trust. Maybe it's a betrayal of trust from a husband or a wife, or maybe it's a betrayal of trust from someone you look to for spiritual counseling. I want you to know that the pain that you're feeling today is very, very, very natural, because if you were to listen to what I just said about David's emotions, David talked about the very deep pain and deep hurt that he's feeling. So if you're going through this, I'd like you to know that it's part of the process of healing to get in touch with that pain and to talk about that pain and to write about that pain the way that David did. And later on in our broadcast, I'm going to give some more tips as to how that tremendous pain can be dealt with, and on the consequences of broken trust, how that can be dealt with in a therapeutic way.
So Psalm 55, I've read that a number of times, but never really focused in on that. I mean, David is saying there that he was actually trembling, that he was so emotionally in pain that he was actually trembling and so on. I've never really sort of focused in on that, but I have to read that again a few times.
Yes, very interesting. Sometimes we miss that. The great men of God, they were humans. They were not always fighting Goliath like fearlessly, but they can have pain and tremble as a result.
Kills a bear and kills a lion, but he can still experience that deep emotional pain and so on.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And I think it's important for men to hear that as well, because sometimes as men, I think we feel that we can't talk about our pain and we can't talk about our hearts being broken, and we're
great at hiding that.
Yeah, we're very good at hiding it. But it's David was a great and mighty man of God, fearless and strong. But yet he was able to say, because my friend and my acquaintance betrayed my trust, I have this tremendous pain inside.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's very interesting. Again, I say I'll encourage everyone. I'm going to read Psalm 55 again and get a little bit deeper into that and get a good understanding of that. When we think about this whole thing about broken trust, we of course, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is broken trust caused by an affair, maybe between husband and wife, an affair. That seems to be the one that we think of the most,
Right.
But I'm sure there's other ways that trust can be broken. Maybe you could just elaborate on some of those things for us as well.
Right. As you said, we tend to think of trust being broken as some act that is done by someone. So there are actually two ways in which trust can be broken. Trust can be broken by what we call in overt way, when a trusted partner does something that was unthinkable, like an affair, as we mentioned before. But trust can also be broken in a covert way, and this happens when a partner did not do something that they were expected to do. So let me just elaborate on that. An example of that would be a wife who is going through a very difficult pregnancy, for example, and she expects that a loving husband would be there to take care of her, to walk with her through the pain, to deal with her discomfort and to help her to feel comfortable while going through that hard 9 months. But if that is not done, then the wife or the wife who is pregnant could end up feeling that I can't trust my partner to be there for me when I am not at my best. We see the same thing that happens when there is a sickness, for example, someone battling cancer, for example. If they feel that they are somehow abandoned by the spouse during that time, where they didn't feel the love and the care, or that the spouse wasn't doing things that they were supposed to do, then trust can be damaged in that way as well. So trust is damaged both by doing things that is overt way of broken trust, but then the covert way of breaking trust is when a partner does not step up to the plate and performs a role that is expected. And interestingly, in relationships between adults, when we have the second form of broken trust, the covert breaking of trust, psychologists describe that as an attachment injury as well to the relationship, where there is now this lack of trust, where I can't count on you as my spouse to be there for me. And those kind of injuries are very profound, because even after the pregnancy, even after the person recovers from the sickness, there is still this underlying level of anxiety in the relationship, where the spouse who went through the hardship is feeling, you don't have my back.
Yeah,
and
it sits there and simmers kind of in the background.
It's always in the background.
Yeah. So just to get back to some biblical examples, like can you think of some biblical examples of this overt and covert betrayal and breaking of trust?
Yeah, if I were to think about that, I would say that an example of a covert way of breaking trust would be the example of Peter's denial. Right? Peter did not really go out and, actively betray Jesus, right?
Yes.
But he denied him when he was placed in a difficult situation. He did not step up to the plate and say, I love Jesus and you can't do that to Jesus. So in a sense, is breaking the trust that, one would expect of him to be there when Jesus was going through that hard time. So that could be a kind of an example of a covert way of breaking trust. The other way, another example of the overt way of breaking trust would be Judas.
Yes.
Judas actually went out and did something that wasn't expected of him. He sold out Jesus. He betrayed him. Yeah. So in those two examples, I think, are biblical examples of that.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting for sure. Earlier on, you talked about this whole thing about the severe emotional pain and, the psychological scars that, can affect, future relationships as you try to move forward. But, are there circumstances that, can actually heighten that or magnify, the harm of broken trust?
I think I touched on that a little bit earlier when I talked about if a person was in a vulnerable state and the partner did not step up to the plate, like when trust is broken at those significant times, such as pregnancy or during a life-threatening illness, then the wound becomes very, very profound and is very, very hard to heal, and often takes counseling before that trust can be rebuilt. But other circumstances that magnify the harm would be when trust is broken at a very young age. It often leaves an indelible mark on the psyche of the person, of the child.
Yes.
So children who grow up feeling that I can trust my parents to be there for me. I can trust that they love me unconditionally. Yeah. I can trust that they will take care of my needs. I can trust that they will protect me. These children often grow up exhibiting profound psychological wounds that they carry through life, because the trust happened at a time when they were forming their personality and coming into an understanding of who they really are.
And then I guess that's when you have the issue of like one parent families as well, where in many cases we see where there's no father even around, and and so on. But so you see that deep emotional pain, and then apart from that deep emotional pain, what can be some of the the long-term effects on people who've had their trust violated? What are some of the things that they would exhibit that you would see?
That's a very good question, Rick. And let me just take a pause here before I answer that question to say that if you're just joining us today, you're listening to the Life Transformation radio broadcast, and I am your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counseling Service, and with me in studio today is Rick Leque, and we are discussing the effect. We are discussing trust, and in particular broken trust, and we have been talking about a number of different points about trust, and you can listen to this podcast online if you have not heard the beginning of this broadcast. Also, if you are in a relationship where you are suffering as a result of broken trust, I'd like you to know that you can get help by calling us at 613-699-1677. You can also find out more about us at www.elamcounselingministry.com. So let me go back to your question, Rick. So you had asked about the effect of broken trust. What are some of the effects? Sometimes I see couples who come before me for counseling, and one of the spouses suffering from the effect of broken trust, sometimes from a previous relationship.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with the current spouse, but because of the effect of that broken trust in the previous relationship, it's as if they're afraid of getting too close to their new partner. There is this sense from the new partner that there is a holding back of the love that they would need. And what is happening there is that the effect of trust being broken is that that partner is becoming avoidant, is becoming distant, because there is a part of them that is saying, I don't want to be hurt again. I can give my heart to someone else again because I am afraid that I might be hurt again. So that's one of the effect. Another effect of broken trust, as you probably know, would be low self-esteem.
Yes.
If my trust is broken, sometimes people can go into this place where they start feeling, maybe I am unlovable. Maybe there is something about me that caused my husband to cheat on me.
Yeah.
Maybe if I were a better wife, or maybe if I were a better child, my parents would love me better. So oftentimes we find this issue of self-esteem that becomes a problem in relationships like that. Another effect would be anxiety, another effect of broken trust, where a person develops a level of anxiety where they become very, very afraid that they're going to be hurt again. And anxiety in the sense, I give you an example of that. Like one person I counseled some years ago, where her trust was severely violated in a previous relationship. Even if her husband were to be 2 minutes late from coming home from work, she would go into anxiety.
Wow.
Because she would be remembering what would happen in that other relationship when her husband would not come home sometimes for days.
So then this all just starts to play back in her mind.
It starts to play back over and over again. So that anxiety from just being 2 minutes late. So if you're listening to us today and you can identify with that, you're dealing with anxiety as a result of having trust broken in a previous relationship and it's now affecting your current relationship, I want you to know that you can get help, and that counseling is available, and that through counseling you can overcome that. You're listening to Life Transformations. This is your host, Michael Hart. I can be reached at 613-699-1677.
So, Michael, talking about all this and this whole thing about this emotional pain and this thing about broken trust, and I'm kind of wondering that maybe there's a couple listening to the show today, and they're going through this difficult time because trust has been violated, and I'm kind of wondering, it could be an affair, it could be some other thing. We've talked about a number of different ways that this whole thing about trust, this relationship can be broken, but what are some of the ways in which they can begin to start to rebuild trust? There has to be a way, a way back to wholeness in trust and in that relationship.
Right.
So what are some of those things that people can do?
That's a very, very good question, Rick, because people often have this feeling that they're stuck. It's like they're in this dance that's causing a lot of pain and they don't know how to get out of it. So I guess one of the first things that couples or going through this trust issue in their relationship can begin to do is to, number one, to begin to distinguish between what is fact and what is fear. In the example I give about the husband coming in 2 minutes late, okay, what's factual here, and what's really just fear that is unfounded in reality.
Yeah.
So one of the exercises I will take couples through in going through that is doing a process where they look at the situation objectively and said, okay, he's 2 minutes late. Realistically, could he really have done anything bad in this 2 minutes? Are there other reasons why he could be coming
Instead
home
of just
2
getting
minutes
stuck
late?
in traffic or
Right,
something.
he could have been stuck in traffic, right? Realistically. So distinguish between facts and fear, and acknowledge the facts, right? Acknowledge the facts.
Yeah.
And I think for the partner who is coming through the door 2 minutes late and is being attacked, where are you? You said you were coming home at 5 and it's now 2 minutes after 5, right? What were you doing in those 2 minutes, right? Sometimes that partner can become very frustrated, especially if it's happening over and over over again. So one of the secret of helping to alleviate that kind of a cycle in a relationship is for that partner to become proactive in validating the feelings of the wounded partner. So in other words, don't wait for the situation to come up to try to explain it away. Be the person to call ahead of time and say, well, you know what, I'm stuck in traffic and I'm going to be late. And if let us say that partner was guilty of an affair before, and this wounded spouse can't get over it, and he or she's always bringing up the affair.
Yes, of course.
What the guilty partner can do is to become the one who brings up the affair, becomes the one who will say, without a conflict, you know what, I've been thinking about what I did to you, and I'm very, very sorry.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
But instead,
reinforce that.
I can understand the way you feel, but sometimes we find the opposite, where the partners who perpetrated the wrong is becoming upset and guilty because the person is always bringing it up. No, you be the initiator and brings up. Another thing is that there should be accountability. If trust has been broken, then the partner who has broken the trust should be 100% accountable to that spouse.
Yeah.
Be an open book.
Yeah, open book. Yeah, it's good.
If it's something involving the internet, give password to your emails and so forth. Keep commitments. If you said you're going to do something, then do it. And finally, we have to wrap up here because time is going very quickly, and I have that time to get into some of the other things that we'd like to talk about today. But let me say that one of the important things is to be patient, because often broken trust is going to take time to repair, and it's not a miracle. So, Rick, I want to thank you very much for being here with me in studio today. Time went by more quickly than we had anticipated. Didn't get a time to go into. So maybe we need to do this again and have a second part where we look more at some of the solutions. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here today.
And it was a pleasure having you. So you have been listening to Life Transformation, an Elam Counseling Service radio show. And this is your host, Michael Hart, thanking you for listening. Until next time, I pray that God would grant you happiness in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart. God bless you for now, and thank you for listening.